My name is Siege, and I call it industrial figurative because it's got industrial stuff and it's got figures, and you know, I made that up 20 years ago.
I'm Vikram Madan, and I create whimsical, invented narrative pieces in oils and acrylics, and I also do some public art here and there.
I'm Lisa Myers-Bulmash, and I am a collage and book artist. So I take existing books and I manipulate them to create new works of art. And when I'm doing collage, I do both 2D and 3D collage, which is also called assemblage. I've been making art professionally for about 6 years, and I'm really informally trained. I didn't go back to school to get a master's in fine art or anything. I took art retreats and I took some local classes, and I had some teachers that really fired off a lot of really interesting ideas in my mind.
Most of my life I was an engineer. I was working in software. And then a couple of years ago I realized, life's short. I've always had this calling to do art, create art, but I don't know how. So after agonizing over it for a while, I one day took a leap of faith and quit my job and went to art school for a couple of years, and that's where I learned to paint. And those paintings were actually done somewhere in the middle of art school. I went into art school thinking I'd be the serious, abstract, figurative painter, and halfway through the whimsy started popping up in my work, and that's when it really felt like mine. So I found myself in that process, and now I mostly create whimsical and humorous paintings.
I was a printmaker in college, so I like the surface of paper. And I like type and typography, but I hate messages. So there's a balance there. It's acrylic. I'm an impatient painter, so I paint as fast as I can, and even acrylic doesn't dry fast enough for me, so I put lamps against it. I paint, basically blitz, go out, have lunch, come back, take the lamps away, blitz, put the lamps back on, and leave. So it's a sine wave or a sawtooth process.
I've been very, very privileged to have parents who encouraged me to be who I wanted to be, to do the kind of work I wanted to do, but yet and still, I didn't find the courage to become a visual artist until both of them were gone.
I was always creating things as a kid, but I never understood that there was an artist in me, and so I kind of just followed the herd and ended up going into a safe profession, which was engineering. But this urge to keep creating just stayed with me throughout my life, and I struggled with it a lot. And then one year I went to Paris, and I was standing in front of this painting in the Museum d'Orsay, and I thought to myself, I always wanted to create art, but how is it that I don't even know how to paint or draw or do anything? So when I came back, I really felt it was time. At least, even if I just learned to do one painting properly for myself, I would be a more fulfilled person.
If I'm working, I'm listening to music, and I'm usually drinking coffee, and I'm often dancing around making a fool of myself, but luckily there's no one there to see me. And then if I enjoy that, the art happens accidentally. And so oftentimes when I come back in the room, I go, whoa, cool. And it's not as though I did it, it's as though I found it there. But it happens because I like being in the space. So the renewal part is really new day, come in, have this lovely experience of being in your space. If you have to go in and have an experience you don't like, you'll never get anything done.
I'm pursuing something that is pretty risky, and a ton of people want to do it, so there's a lot of competition. But I am doing this partly because I want my kids to understand that if you want to do something, you need to throw yourself into it and do your best. Because you really don't want to be that person who's sitting around when they're 70 going like, well, I wonder what will happen. what might have been. You don't want to be that person.
You really have to think about what's important to you personally, and people will regret at the end of their lives the things they didn't do. So if there are things that feel personally important, that it's something you have to do in this lifetime, you kind of have to remember life is short. The older I get, the more I see how short life is. There was a time when I used to think, yes, one day I'll retire and become an artist, and now I think that I made the right choice by embracing this earlier, because I'll definitely not have regrets about having tried this. Even if this never worked out, if it turned out I couldn't make a living doing it, it all frizzled, I would be able to look back and say I tried.
The pieces that you see on exhibit, especially the mounted books on the washboards, they have a layer of a painted over image that's layered underneath a transparency of a little boy running into a house. And that's actually my older brother, running into the house that we grew up in way back in the... And so for that triptych in particular, it's called Bought and Paid For, and I was focusing my attention on the theme of home. Home is something that's really important to me. It's not exactly a castle, but it's a refuge, it's a sanctuary. And the images that I chose were either because they reminded me of sanctuary or because they were the total opposite. So one of the house images is an altered version of the house I live in now. One of them is an altered version of the house my mother grew up in Kentucky. And the last one is actually an image of an auction house where people were sold. I found it a little tough when I was considering that image, but then I thought, I have to include this because it's called an auction house, not an auction home. So I really liked the idea of playing the auction house, the slave auction house, against images of houses that are actual homes, actual refuges and sanctuaries.
So one of the pieces is called The Journey is the Adventure, and it's about these two little fellas that are climbing over the stroll. And the idea behind that piece is when you're, every book you read, every movie, every story, it's always about the journey, it's never about the ending. And I read a statement once that stuck in my head, and it said, if you're sitting home safe in bed, you're not having an adventure. And if you're wishing you were sitting home safe in bed, then you are having an adventure. So that piece is actually a reminder to me, myself, to treat my life as an adventure, that it's all about the journey. And the other piece is called The Parting Gift That Changed Everything. And I leave it as a puzzle to the viewer to figure out exactly what that gift is, and who's doing the giving and who's doing the receiving. I'm trying to help people rekindle this lost sense of innocence.
I don't think I've thought of the Northwest, growing up in the Northwest as something that was an influence, but I suppose it is. Bridges are great, to begin with, because they have a romantic element, but they also have an industrial element. So bridges are I love them. And so now I stop and take pictures of bridges wherever I am, Most of them I don't turn into a painting, but sort of, I don't stop at tourist things, but I stop at bridges. The boats, I saw some boats, last year, and in a boatyard that I wasn't there for the boatyard, I was there because we were traveling, and I went in, it was like in the Andromeda strain where there's this huge place and everyone's gone, and I was like, there was a spell on it, and I was like, this is cool. So I ended up doing some boats.
I think one of the things I realized, in the beginning when you start doing art, every piece becomes very precious to you, especially when you're a developing artist. You don't know if you can better yourself in the next piece. And then one thing I realized over time is, the art is meant to be seen. It's not meant to be sitting in my home on my walls. And like I said, I'm doing this to, I say I try to make the world a better place one smile at a time. And therefore, I'm doing the world a disservice if I'm hoarding the art to myself.
People make art because they want to communicate in some way. And some people do it through symbols, some people do it through the spoken word, some people do it through the written word, some people perform. But it's all people trying to reach out and connect to other people and find out what their lives are like and share what their own lives are like.
The exhibit is free and runs from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. Centennial Center Gallery is located at 400 West Gow Street, next to Kent City Hall. Sponsored by Kent Arts Commission.